want to welcome everybody, and we have a really lovely audience of attendees. I want to welcome everyone to Bodies of Empathy on behalf of the Helen Diller Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies. I also want to thank the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies for their partnership here and all through the year. The Helen Diller Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies is dedicated to several initiatives at UC Berkeley, including bringing Israeli visiting faculty and scholars to teach courses on campus, conduct research, and engage in fruitful intellectual conversations and projects with Berkeley academic colleagues and students. The Helen Diller Institute is also committed to creating academic programs, lectures, and symposia on relevant topics and issues of the day that engage with Israel studies and Israeli scholars, and also with Jewish law, thought, and identity, often in collaboration with other units on campus. Our program today, entitled Bodies of Empathy, builds on both of these commitments, designed and curated by Helen Diller Institute visiting professor Yael Nativ in collaboration with the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies, where Professor Nativ is currently teaching this spring. So I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Yael Nativ, who prefers to go by Yali, and then we'll hand her the floor to continue our program. Dr. Yael Nativ is a dance scholar with sociological and anthropological orientations. She's a senior lecturer at the School for Society and Arts at Ono Academic College, as well as at Levinsky College for Education and at the Mason Gross School of the Arts Online at Rutgers State University of New Jersey. She holds a diploma in dance education from the Kibbutzim College, a bachelor's degree in choreography from the Sorbonne University in Paris, and a master's in interdisciplinary education of the creative arts from San Francisco State University. And she received her PhD in sociology of education from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. In her writing and research, she explores social and cultural issues, looking at the linkage between dance, body, culture, education, gender, and creativity. Her co-written book, Fractured Freedom, Body, Gender, and Ideology in Dance Education in Israel, was published in 2016. She's currently engaged in ethnographic research that looks at the embodied experience among professional Israeli aging dancers who still perform on stage. She is a co-founder and member of the Israeli Society for Dance Research and serves as the head of the board of directors of the Israeli Association of Independent Choreographers. During this spring semester, Dr. Nativ is a visiting professor at UC Berkeley, teaching a course on intersectional perspectives on contemporary dance in Israel in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies, and in collaboration with the Helen Diller Institute. So I turn to Yali now to more fully introduce our event and our speakers.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. I hope Sharon is in. Is he in? Because we had some problems with Sharon Fridman. Maya, is he in?
I'm checking and we'll contact him.
Okay, because he got your link. So, hello everyone. I'm trying to be concentrated because of I got a little bit stressed. I'm delighted to open this true international event with people from Israel, the East Coast, and Europe, I think. And first and foremost, I want to thank our speakers today from Israel, choreographers Yasmeen and Sharon Fridman. I hope he's here. Yasmeen, could you wave so people will know who you are? And dance scholar Einav Katan-Schmidt. Hi. And from UC Berkeley, Professor Sansan Kwan. There she is. I will introduce you again with your affiliations before you speak, and I want to audience pay attention that the full bios of the speakers will appear in the chat box while they're speaking, so you can scroll and have the information. I also want to take this opportunity to extend my thanks and gratitude, first of all, to Rebecca Goldberg, the Executive Director of Helen Diller Institute for Jewish Studies and Israel Studies here at UC Berkeley, for inviting me to teach this course on intersectional perspectives on contemporary dance in Israel, and to also welcome my students who are here with us. This is in fact our class hour. So it is great to have you all with our students. And the topic of empathy is on our syllabus. So this is our class on this topic today. And I want to thank, of course, Professor Joe Good, Chair of the Theater, Dance and Performance Studies Department, and Alexa Fosdick and Ben Dillon, who helped prepare and promote this event. And lastly, of course, I want to thank Maya Shemtov, who is here with us and supporting us with tech and many other things. So we're here today to talk about empathy in dance, or empathy in dance. And when I'm thinking about the historical context of this topic in relation to modern thinking in dance, I think it is safe to say that it has a father and a mother, both American, and both started working in the 60s. And they are, of course, Steve Paxton, who developed contact improvisation, which was accompanied by a discourse around the issue of democratization of the choreographic process, and also with looking at power relationship between people and statuses in the field. And the other, the mother, is Anna Halbourine, who spent most of her time here in San Francisco Bay Area. We actually can see her mountain across the bay from the Berkeley Hills, and who introduced ideas, practices, and rituals based on empathy in dance, working with community and attending to their needs through and with the body. Anna passed just a year ago in May 2021 at 100 years old, and I feel honored to mention her here in this context today. Since then, there's been obviously a development both on the discursive level and the practical level, and I do hope that through our presentations and discussions today, we will be able to see how these discourses and practices live in the works and ideas of contemporary choreographers and scholars, both in Israel, Europe, and US, and to expand our knowledge on empathy as a conceptual and choreographic tool. So I will start with Yasmeen. Yasmeen Goder is the artistic director and choreographer of Yasmeen Goder Dance Company, operating in Tel Aviv since the 90s. And I hope her bio is right, streaming now in the chat box. Hi, Yasmeen. Are you open? Your
Hi.
mic is open? Okay.
Yes.
Hi. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Yasmeen, welcome. I would like to start with showing two excerpts from your recent works, which are part of your continuous larger project, Practicing Empathy. The first is from Practicing Empathy number 3 from 2021, which is solo, it's your solo. And the second will be from Empathy 2 on 2 for 2020, from 2020, which was during COVID. And I will say that there is Empathy 1, obviously, that premiered in 2019. So we will watch first and then we'll talk, okay? So let me share my screen. Just need to make sure it's the right one. Let's just go from here.
שלום, ערב טוב. ברוכים הבאים, ברוכות הבאות למתרגלים אמפתיה 3. אני יסמין גודר. כיף לראות הרבה פרצופים מוכרים. היצירה הזאת במקור נועדה ללהקה שלי, בשיתוף עם קהילות משתנות תוך שאנחנו נוסעים בארץ ובעולם, אבל בגלל הקורונה היא נהייתה סולו. אז הנה אני לבד, איתכן, איתכן. לפני 6 שנים התחלתי ליצור עבודות שמתייחסות למופע כמפגש. בין זרים. והן עושות את זה על ידי הזמנת הקהל להשתתף בכל מיני פרקטיקות אינטראקטיביות והשתתפותיות בזמן אמיתי בתיאטרון. העבודות האלה ייצרו כל מיני סוגים של פידבקים ותגובות, אבל משהו אחד שחזר על עצמו שוב ושוב הייתה המילה אמפתיה. אנשים תיארו את החוויה שלהם הן בלעשות והן בלצפות בעזרת המילה הזאת. ומצד אחד ידעתי מה זאת אמפתיה, או לפחות חשבתי שאני יודעת, ומצד שני, ככל שחקרתי, ככה יותר התבלבלתי והסתקרנתי. יש משהו טיפה מתעתע באמפתיה, גם כי יש לה המון פרשנויות מאוד מגוונות בגופי ידע שונים, כמעט ברמה שמתנגשת, וגם כי לפעמים מרגישים אותה בצורה מאוד ברורה ונוכחת, כמעט ברמה הפיזית, ולפעמים קשה לחוש אותה וצריך לעבוד בזה. אז חשבתי שיהיה מעניין לחקור אמפתיה דרך מחול, דרך כוריאוגרפיה וגוף, לא רק ממקום אינטלקטואלי או שכלתני, אלא להחזיר את זה חזרה אל הגוף עם אנשים דרך חוויה ופעולה. וככה נולד הפרויקט הגדול יותר, מתרגלים אמפתיה, שזה פרויקט שבתוכו יש גם מפגשים קהילתיים, גם סדנאות וגם מופעים. שתי יצירות כבר עלו ורצות, מתרגלים אמפתיה 1 ומתרגלים אמפתיה 2/2, שאולי אפילו חלק מכם כבר ראיתם או חוויתם. וכשהבנתי שבגלל הקורונה אני הולכת לעבוד על היצירה הזאת לבד, חשבתי שיהיה מעניין לקחת את כל השאלות האלה ולהחזיר אותם אליי, אל הגוף שלי.
Okay, I'm showing the other one immediately and then we will talk. Just a couple of minutes from empathy 2 on 2. Okay. So here we are. So Yasmeen, my first question refers to empathy 1 to empathy 3. And I want to ask you, why did you make the choice to include this talk in the performance? It's kind of a performative talk that you are doing, and it is part of the apparatus of the whole performance. And why did you make this choice? And how do you connect this choice to the concept of empathy in this piece?
Okay, well, hi everyone. Great to have this event, and thank you for the invitation, Yali and everyone else involved. So the solo was made in 2021, which was, or 22, no, 21, which was already 3 years into my research of practicing empathy. So I felt like there was so much that I already, in a way, was dealing with in my research, and was holding also in my body, in my mind, in my being, both in terms of what this word, how this word is echoing in terms of the work itself, but also in terms of how people were responding to it, the kind of dialogues that were happening around, is this empathy, is this not empathy? What kind of empathy is this? How does this practice empathy? All these questions were rising out of the works. And in a way, I felt like this was an opportunity to stand and speak to the people, and to speak to people who were coming to see the work. Also, as I said in the monologue, I ended up, I mean, practicing empathy number 3 was supposed to be a project to do with community, basically. And as we tour and travel, and COVID-19 and, you know, the whole situation of the shutdowns made me have to go to the studio alone and meet myself there with these questions that we were engaging with. So this whole notion of self-empathy started to come up. And then something about the idea of allowing myself as a choreographer to start a work by sharing, first of all, the content of what brought me to this place, or how I arrived at it, was in a way an empathic act towards myself, but also maybe towards the audience, in that it shares something, it exposes something, it tells everyone that's in the room with me where this is starting out, what is the starting point for this, or exposing from the get-go my intentions, my desire within this project, and kind of like taking off all these layers that maybe that are connected to expectations, that are connected to the tension even of watching a show. So it works on a number of levels. It works both on kind of allowing myself to have a voice in the situation, allowing people to enter in immediately into where I'm at with this, but also at a later point, right after almost this section that you presented, there's a moment where I ask, I want you to take a moment to notice yourself here now. How does your body feel?
2 by 2?
No, in the solo, how does your body feel? Where is your breath located? Even now, as we're sitting here in this Zoom session, how are we seated on the chair? How are we here with each other? So it transfers the monologue of you know, sharing my starting point or my intention, slowly transfers to my body, but also to the bodies of the people who are there with me in the room. And so, I've never done that before. It's not something that maybe for people who are less familiar with my work, it's not something that I've ever done, entered the space with speaking and describing what I'm going to expose or share. And so that it's a way for me also to let go of something of that mystique of what's that solo going to be about, and acknowledging the curiosity, acknowledging the weight that's there in the presence of the space. So yeah, that's the speaking aspect of it. And throughout the piece, I do speak, and I speak about the process of the year that I went through, from this starting point of realizing that the work is going to be a solo, and on to understanding in the shutdowns how to deal with my body and emotions, and who I ended up collaborating with, and how that kind of brought me back to my own family, and to this notion of a cocoon that we carry with ourselves, or that we formed in this time. So yeah, it goes back and forth between, and it goes back and forth between a more I guess exposed physical approach to a kind of documentary almost of the year through the words.
Mhm.
I'll
So it
just say
has-
that,
yeah.
like, just to add just something shortly, that, you know, I, as a choreographer, I'm often in these situations where I do talk about my work, like right now.
Mhm.
So it was interesting for me to almost like bring that identity into a performative situation, which of course right now is also a performative situation, but in the context of performing a solo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is about vulnerability and sharing. And regarding the second excerpt I showed from 2 by 2, not 2 on 2, right?
Yes.
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 I wanted to ask you briefly how empathy comes about in the actual practice that we've seen. And
Mhm.
I just want to say also that it is really difficult to see who is the audience and who are the dancers. And
Mhm.
the audience has a very essential place in these pieces in the empathy project, right? So you can talk a little bit about that. We have about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes.
Okay. So 2 by 2 was a response to the situation that we were not able to present another work we created, which was Practicing Empathy #2, which was an interactive work and had touch, etc. And it dealt with this 2-meter restriction, which the 2-meter in during this time was kind of a place of avoidance in the body. Like the 2-meter is, as you
Mhm.
walk next to a person, is a place of making sure that you create a safe space, but it creates a kind of avoidance. And I was interested in how I could transform those 2 meters into a place of, first of all, a safe space and a space of intimacy, and a place that allows for other bodies or different bodies to interact and exchange, not necessarily through touch, but through it. I don't know if it was clear through the video, but we used a lot of mirroring practices.
Yes.
And I think, you know, something about this idea of constantly of the mirror, which in a way is a very simple tool in choreography and, you know, in dance and in improvisation, but it carries something very deep in terms of the kind of negotiation that needs to happen in real time between 2 people who are, let's say, playing within this context. How, on one hand, to listen to oneself, and at the same time to be aware of the other, and to find a common place. And that's always, and it has its pull and push. And in a way, how to meet people who we don't know, and stay also very open to whatever it is that comes up in that exchange. Because as the performers are in the video, you could see that they have their duets, which they do with each other, in which they practice with each other this form, but then they turn to the to audience members, and at that point they need to stay very open to whatever is going to happen while carrying through this kind of journey. So it's also, we called it a generous leadership, because it is a leadership. It is allowing people to enter into a kind of score that gives them, in a way, kind of journey, but at the same time staying open to whatever it is that can come up in the history of the body that's in front of you. And it requires a kind of porousness, and there's definitely an interdependency.
Yes.
And again, if you said the word vulnerability. I think that's a big word here. In also as performers who are used to coming with knowing what they're doing and being sure of what they're going to present, and opening up to themselves to strangers and allowing that to kind of take them while carrying it. So that's, and I think, within that is that empathy, is that not, that's a question, but I think that for me, what's interesting is what it takes of the psyche, the emotions, the body, to be able to carry that. Like, how can both the performers but also the participants, how can within that format they can listen to their own processes, their own places where they are less open, more willing to respond to each other, more resistant. I think this, like, kind of almost like opening space to listen to these things and to engage with them. I think that for me it was a big thing, especially post shutdowns, where everyone, I felt also in my company, but also, in general in the public, wanted to meet again, but needed to re-understand how we're going to do that. And still, in a way.
I think, thank you, Yasmeen. I'm sorry. I think these
it's
are
okay.
We will probably come back to at the end, and I'm sure with Einav when she's going to kind of wrap up for us. And I'm moving on to Sharon. I hope he's here. Sharon, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good evening,
good.
everyone.
All right. So I'm introducing Sharon Fridman. Is a choreographer and director of the Sharon Fridman Company operating in Madrid. Hi, Sharon. Hello.
Hi, good evening.
I'll start again by showing two excerpts of your choice from your work from 2020, Shape on Us, to the Israeli Vertigo Dance Company. The first excerpt is a duet between Shmuel and Tomer, you told me. And then immediately we will see a section from the end of the piece, which you called in our conversation, Legs, right? Okay, so I'm showing the duet first. So just take me 2 minutes to get there.
I think we still need to share screen.
I forgot to share. Sorry about that. Basic. Here we go.
It's not a duet, but
I'm sorry for stopping. I'm moving to the other one. Okay, again, I apologize for stopping. Showing dance works in excerpts is not the best. Hi, Sharon.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask you, why did you ask me to show these particular two sections from Shape on Us, and also to connect your answer to the title, to the word shape on us?
Yes, so good evening again. And just to correct that, yes, just to correct that we saw two parts. The first one was not the duet, it was another part of the piece. It's not really matters, it doesn't really matters, but just no problem. Yeah, I thought about these parts, but it could be also each other part of the piece, maybe. I will start to speak about the Shape on Us that actually came from the title Shame on Us, or the word shame on us, that we manipulated and decided to use shape, our shape. But actually it was a little critic, no, about ourselves as society, looking on this topic as actually as a problem, or as something maybe that could sometimes look negative. My point of view on these bodies were like I saw unique and exceptional bodies, different bodies, the opportunity to work with a different body. Even I had for a certain moment in the process this idea in my head saying that to work with the professional dancers became a classical, the classical work, let's say. And now we have the big opportunity to work with these contemporary bodies that have, yeah. And when I understood that is when I think something opened in my view, and this was why I decided to call it like shape on us, or yeah.
And how did you work with these shapes in the process?
When I started the process of shape on us, I came with a lot of questions, and I had in my head all the ideas that you cannot do with bodies that are different. I was in my head when I imagined the piece before meeting the people, I really had scenes that you cannot do when you have different bodies. So I came actually with a big conflict after years of working with professional dancers, even that I worked also with different professional and non-professional dancers. Still, this kind of work was a big thing for me. But in the first day when I came to the studio and I had this question if it's possible to go down from the chairs and to leave all material and just stay bodies on the floor. In that moment, I understood the need to create a language. I understood the need to speak with each other, to explain the different needs we have, to be able to advance together in a space where we are kind of depending in each other. So somehow I came back home, and now I'm going one step back. And I grew with my mother at home alone. So my mother had this very special, diverse body. She's dealing with Arnold Chiari. It's an ataxia, and she have like a problem with the balance. She doesn't know that when her body is straight, so she's always kind of falling, in a continuous falling. So she needs to touch a straight line to be able to be straight by herself. So dealing with that all my life, in a certain moment in my process, I understood that this is what I want to dedicate when I think about choreography and research, body research. I understood that this is what I can give, or this is what I can develop using all my history and the living with my mother at home and all what it asked for me.
You already had.
Yeah, so somehow to come back to the studio and speak with these people, it's like to speak with my mother. It was much easier than what I thought before. It was very natural for me to be transparent with them and to understand the need.
And you called it practice INA, right?
So I developed during the last 15 years a practice that I call it practice INA, that it's a series of exercises based on the exercises that I made with my mother, that becomes like a tool to improvisation, but also choreography.
So can you tell us a little bit about the work with the dancers and maybe give us one or two examples in the time we have left of how did you work with this practice? And
yeah, actually, a part of the physical aspect of practicing different exercises, I used to speak a lot with them, and I tried to understand the composition of their lives. And I try to give to each one of the participant a place that he can be in front of this society somehow, that he's feeling, he's dealing with. So actually the piece is an invitation to see things or maybe ideas from the lives of those people. So the way to work was very personal work. I remember sitting on the floor, speaking, through that, trying to improvise some ideas that came up from these conversations. And also with my own body, I was working in contact with this body. So one of the big things that I discovered that I could not figure how to put this other body on his center. It's different. It's the sensibility and sensitivity it's asked from you. It's a different tone. So there was a lot of work of improvising with these different bodies and getting very inspired from the possibilities that these bodies brought me, because I could not imagine any form like that in my head before.
Can you say a word about how the interaction was with professional dancers in the group?
Yes, so in this piece, actually they meet professional dancers and also non-professional and diverse dancers or performers. And also there you can see the different approach we have. There is people that could have more difficulty to accept and to be one body with a different body. And you can also see people that really had it in a natural way. And also this was a process. And also the personalities in the piece kind of inspired from the relationship of these people in the studio with the others. But I think, yeah, these 9 people in the studio, it was like a little bit like society. Like come, go, come, yeah. So there is a little bit from everything.
Like a micro society within the studio.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Sharon, I'm moving on to Sansan, and I hope we'll go back to these issues later in the discussion.
Thank you.
Sansan, thank you, Sharon. Sansan Kwon is Associate Professor in the Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies at UC Berkeley. Hi, Sansan. Are you here? Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
I don't see you on the screen yet, but here you are. Really nice to have you here with us. Last year, your book, Love Dances, Loss, Mourning in Intercultural Collaboration was published. In the book, you argue for new forms of ethical models of interculturalism in duets. Can you talk a little bit about the book, what you did in the book, and the concept of how you connect, in your words, ethics, love, and care to the structural form of duets and to the intercultural question?
Yeah, sure, of course. Hi, everyone. And thanks to Yael and to the Helen Diller Institute for organizing this panel today. It's been really exciting to hear about these other artists' work. I feel like the 2 artists, Yasmeen and Sharon, that we just heard from could easily have been people that I look at in my own book. And sorry about my weird light. So yes, the book looks at duets between artists from different cultural, racial, ethnic, gender, age backgrounds. And I think about these duets as models for how we might, all of us, encounter difference in the world. And so I really like what Sharon just said about how his piece with the 9 dancers of mixed abilities is a little bit like, like society. I feel like Yasmeen also said some things about the ways in which there's a particular unique form of modeling that dance can do to teach us about intersubjectivity via intercorporeality. So that's what my book is interested in. I think about the ways in which the work of intersubjectivity, of intercultural collaboration, of learning to understand each other across difference is necessarily always a work of failure. There's always going to be the gaps, the lags, the misses, the miscomprehensions that happen when we try to understand one another. And I think that it's important for us to be wary about the idea, not to over romanticize a notion of empathy, to recognize, and this is drawing from people like Saidiya Hartman, who's an African-American studies scholar, to recognize that it's impossible for us to be overly presumptuous about what we can know about a different body with a different set of cultural, racial, ethnic ability, gender differences. But at the same time, it's really important for us to continue to try, and that trying is what we do in dance when we try to understand another body. And I argue in the book that the effort to continue to try to understand each other via vulnerability, across difference, by submitting the body via improvisation or choreography, is what I call a process of loving. And so that's why the book is called Love Dances.
So there is a process of loss and a process of gain in this relationship, basically. Yeah. Can you show us some examples or talk about examples from the book?
Yeah, sure. So I can show you a clip of a piece called Spiel. It's a duet between a half Vietnamese, half French artist who worked with a Japanese Buto dancer, Kasai Akira. And they are using a process called playback, which they borrow from the contact improviser Lisa Nelson, where one dancer dances a phrase, the other dancer watches it and then tries to replicate it, adds on with their own phrase, and the chain continues like that. So let me set this up for you all. And I apologize, it's not great. The visual is not great. And let me get myself to the right spot. Sorry, one second. Okay.
And this is from when, this piece? What?
Sorry, it's from 2011.
Thank you. I think it's really interesting to see how these choreographic strategies that were developed, as a part of choreography pedagogy or teaching or practicing come back to the stage as a performance. We saw it also with Yasmeen's 2-on-2, that basic exercises that we're doing in class with students are becoming that performance and the way to communicate and negotiate a conversation, right?
Yeah, I think especially in Emmanuel Wien, the Vietnamese French choreographer's work, she's really interested in process more than she's interested in product. And so I think that it's particularly apt in her work that she wants to just show the work of trying to know another person's bodily habitus, another person's way of moving. And you can see in the piece that, the earnest effort in trying to replicate what the person has just done, and the gaps in the ability to fully inhabit those phrases that were created by another body.
Yeah, it also relates to what Yasmeen said about the work of people communicating with their bodies and the effort that it takes and the energy that it takes. Yeah, that it seems simplistic, or it might seem simplistic, but it's not really.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Do you want to show us something else, or this is it?
Yeah, sure. I can show you. I have lots of choices. I will show you. Trying to decide between two.
We have about 2 minutes, so.
Yeah, okay, let me show you another work with Emmanuel Wien with another artist named Eiko Otake. So give me a moment. This was also based on an improvisatory score called Pause Go, where the idea was that one of the two partners would pause and then the other one would also pause. And then when one of the two partners began again, then the other partner would feel that and also begin. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sansan. We'll move on and talk again soon. So we're moving to Einaf Katan Schmidt. Einaf Katan Schmidt is the head of the School of Dance at Kibbutzim College for Education, Technology and Arts in Tel Aviv. Hi, Einaf.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm here.
Yeah.
You need to pin me.
Yes.
Okay.
So Einav, as a dance scholar, you were involved in the research and writing on the topic of embodied ethics from a philosophical perspective, looking at Israeli dancing. One of your published papers, Dance as Embodied Ethics, which you co-wrote with Ailey Brasnan and Sarah Houston, was published in the Routledge Companion to the Performance Philosophy in 2020. And there you talk about dancing as a metaphor for embodied ethics. And I would like to please explain what you mean by metaphor, and can you connect this idea to what we have seen today, to the works of Yasmeen, Sharon, and Sansan, and the ideas that were kind of expressed until now. So you're kind of wrapping up for us and giving us some conceptual tools and terms.
Okay, I was considering showing a PowerPoint, and I think that I will go for it. But first and foremost, I will relate your question. What do I mean with a metaphor? So the title of this paper was Dance as Embodied Ethics. And I didn't want to claim that dance is embodied ethics, but dance can be used as embodied ethics. And this is a matter of embodiment and of engaging with an idea in order to bring it into life, as we saw it in the works here. So it's not any kind of dance can be embodied ethics. And I will start maybe with a PowerPoint that is overview of my current research that deals with touching gestures of relational care in Israeli dance. But I want to relate to the works that we saw today as our case studies. Yes. So my research started out of the question of how to consider ethics in dance and how to practice. Yasmeen asks about practicing empathy, but how to practice this kind of intersubjective witnessing and understanding and working together and future imagining together within dance. And I started here with the work of Fiona Bennan, the British dance scholar that writes about considering ethics in dance, theater, and performance. And she talks a lot about future imagining in co-producing of artworks. And she writes that in the work of particular artists, we can recognize explorations that embrace the nature of differential experiences. We could see it also in the works that Sansan is talking about. Mm-hmm. Artists facilitate as narrator and interpreters of our future imagining. And my motivating question as Israeli, as someone who also moved recently to Israel from Germany and experienced herself intercultural context, is how imagining our future in common can take place and be practiced within social realities with rifts and with seemingly contradicting trauma, as the Israeli societies are. I won't even say a society. So how to start being in touch with foresight and visions, and I'm in purpose going here to the question of imagining as relating to vision, as of a future in common. And I think that dance can play part here, first and foremost because of the physical experience. And I'm coming from philosophy, so this is also part of my position. And I'm relating here also the work of Caroline Crossmeyer, who is a feminist esthetician, a philosopher, and she had a few books about the different senses, and she's talking about the hierarchy of senses as we consider them in a very much dichotomic tradition of philosophy, that the distant senses as seeing and hearing are standardly granted superiority on epistemic, moral, and aesthetic grounds. So my project here is talking about the sense of touch, which is essential to the experience of dancing, because when we are dancing, we are molding and using touch and in order to design movement. So dealing mostly with the sense in touch and offering the interpretive experience of touch in dance, I'm not seeing my own PowerPoint, as a contemplative process with epistemic, aesthetic, and ethical significance. So for those who are not coming from philosophy, I will explain that as a process of knowing and how we know, as a knowledge process and knowledge design, and also aesthetic as a process of design, and ethical, I think it's something that we all have some kind of relationship to what it might mean. So step one, I want to define why dance is epistemological and why touch is epistemological sense. And we could see it also in the works that we witness today, and how it unfolds the perceptual, in order to unfold the perceptual experience of touch. I'm taking it from two philosophers, Richard Kearney from Columbia University, who recently wrote about touch. So first and foremost, he writes about touch as a membrane. It's a sensitive to what is not itself, a portal opening onto a world that can never be shut. It is the first sight of our consent to being and our welcome to others. Being in touch means being at risk between suffering and joy. And without risk, no life is worth living. So first of all, it's like not all kind of touch, right? It's like we are touching also when we are within violent act, and we are touching when we are within care. But also touch is also something that senses itself and senses the other at the same time. Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick, who is a queer feminist philosopher, talking about touching feelings, affect, pedagogy, and performativity. And she's talking more about what we are in touch when we are being in touch. What do we touch when we touch? So even more immediately than other perceptual systems, it seems that the sense of touch makes nonsense out of any dualistic understanding of agency and passivity. To touch is always already to reach out, to fondle, to have, to tap, or to enfold, and always also to understand other people or natural forces as having effectually done so before oneself, if only in the making of the textured object. So when we are touching histories of the objects that we are touching. And for Kosofsky, not here, she's writing also that we are touching already affect. We can think about sexual desire, for example, but not just sexual desire, but mostly when we are touching feelings like shame and guilt and everything that our body holds within themselves. We are touching also trauma. So what do we touch when we touch? We touch knowledge from the past, even if in the textured object or in the stored trauma, articulated as a present feeling. And when I'm talking about feeling, I'm talking about both affect and sensation. So that's the first aspect. I will keep the examples from what we saw to the end because of the time. And I will move to the second aspect of touch in dance and contemplating an experience, the aesthetic aspect of dance. So how do we touch? I'm going here to a quote from Susan Langer, who's talking about feeling and form and how feeling and form are interrelated. So she asked, what then is dance? If it be an independent art as needed, it seems to be, it must have its own primary illusion, rhythmic motion, that is its actual process, not an illusion. The primary illusion of an art, something created and created at the first touch, in this case, with the first motion, performed or even implied. The motion itself, as a physical reality and therefore material in the art, must suffer transformation into what? This has given the answer, everything becomes expression, gesture. She's talking beforehand about this, who gave the example that in dance, everything that is an expression or an illusion is also an actual process. So from artistic point of view, ballerina gives the semblance of overcoming gravity when she does the grand jeté, but from a physical point of view, it's exactly what she does. And I think that we saw it also in the works today, that when, if I'm taking Shape on Us as an example, when we are shaping together bodies, and listening to the shapes that we can bring together, it becomes both the expression of the work, but also the actual process of listening and designing with other people. When we are mirroring each other, it's the expression of mirroring and being together, but it's also the actual process of following one another and listening to one another in order to be in the same rhythm and the same pace. So this is the process of embodiment. It's both creating a gesture by articulating the real process of making it, of doing it, of designing it. So the last question, which leads me in, so how do we touch? We touch a transformation. This is the aesthetic process of design. We are feeling and forming and live through experience. And that's what we are doing when we are moving with our body within dance. So this is what I mean also as a metaphor. We are designing the metaphor. We are bringing it into life. We are bringing it into a live through experience. So I move to the ethical part by suggesting that suggesting dance as a moral process of reasoning. And I'm putting the emphasis also on the process, touching intersubjective witnessing. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, an idea that I engage with, taken from Richard Kearney, because in his book about touch, he's talking about the wounded healer, Chiron, that was wounded by Heracles and escaped to the cave, couldn't heal his own wounds, but because of being in pain and because of being wounded, he was given the power of healing others. So he's writing there, half man, half horse, Chiron was mortally injured by Heracles during a boar hunt when a poisoned arrow struck his leg. Though Chiron could not cure his own wound, he found that he could cure others and become known as a wise and compassionate healer. Pain speaking to pain, those who visited him in his subterranean cave felt more whole and well in his injured presence. So actually the one who was wounded and the one who was in pain could witness and could be in touch with the pain of others. So that's for the last question of why to touch and why to design dance as embodied ethics. So being within the other spaces, bodies, times with care. And this is part of the argument. And like Sansan, I'm very much interested in my work in the potential of dance and something that takes from particular case studies, something that we can think of and further design as a cultural act, that when we are dancing, we are moving our body in spaces and times. We are moving our bodies within the stored memories and in our muscles, in the shape of the muscles, in the shape of trauma, in the shape of whatever we saw in our bodies, in the shape of cultural heritage, the feelings we have towards this cultural heritage. Each one of us has a different response to touch according to our personal histories, according to our cultures, according to different training techniques that we had, different relationships, psychological relationships that we have towards our body. And when we touch with care, we touch with the aim to understand and to unfold these feelings and to move with these feelings and to transform these feelings. This is when we can move through time and also carry with us the past in order to move forward into the future. So this is part of the work. I can now relate to it, I think, in all the works that we saw as the case study. Depends the time that we have.
About 2 minutes, and then we will have some discussion, hopefully, with questions.
Okay, so I want to say something about the process of engagement. Also, something that I thought of in the process of practicing empathy of Yasmeen, when she leads us to partake the dance, to imagine the touch ourselves, to lead us into the process as if we are the dancers, listening to our body, folding these feelings and leading it into a transformation of a feeling. She really brings the audience into feeling the process of what we are doing when we are dancing. We are taking a physical feeling and transforming it into something else, into an image or into another feeling, into another experience. And also, this is also part of the transformative, maybe, power of dancing.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Eina, for articulating this so beautifully and giving us words and terms that we can think with. And I also wanted to comment on something on all the presenters here today, that all of them are talking in relation of larger society and future, common future, and trying to create through dance something that is bigger, that is going beyond dance, and something that has to do with humanities and realities of life. So I think we are going to open now for questions. Rebecca, are you ready?
Sure.
We have about 10 minutes and we are extending our time a little bit.
Sure. So these questions, though, some of them have been directed toward Yasmeen. I think that they actually speak to all of our speakers. And I'm gonna go over all three of the questions that I've received so that we can sort of open it up. One question is asking about whether the dancers, the movements that the dancers in these performances are doing with audience members were set or improvised. Another question asks about how empathy relates to compassion in these performances. And the third question asks about, similarly to the first question, about the relationship in the meeting between skilled dancers and the audience members. And what kinds of options those sort of unequal encounters open up.
Maybe I'll start. So as for the first question, specifically in practicing empathy 2 by 2, there's the performers do have a set score, partially, but there's an aspect of what they're doing that has to stay, let's call it fresh or still in question and in lived experience. So it's not just about the shape of the movement, it's about engaging with each other in a way that has this kind of hypersensitivity. I'm also performing in this piece, and so there are, it really asks, so it's almost like I have to forget what I know at the part where we're actually just doing the duet. And when we turn to the participants, there are parts of the score that are set so we can carry the piece through, but parts of it are very open to what's happening between our interaction, or what's happening within our interaction, so that it's really open to whoever's there. And everything that was spoken about you know, taking into consideration, and this goes maybe to the third question about the skilled and the skilled performer and the non-professionals, but taking into consideration that we are all carrying these, you know, histories in our bodies, cultural, personal trauma, and that there are parts of it that we need to work in with ourselves as we're trying to connect to others and to things that we maybe don't understand or will not understand, or also connect to on other maybe visceral levels. And I think a big part of it is to try to understand what it takes of us as performers to be there with all this information. It's quite a lot. And in relationship to this idea of it's maybe even to share something about performance, about being there together in a kind of tension where we're both committed to each other on the same level. Sometimes we have witnesses, so people watching from the side. We've done many different variations on this. We did, for example, one time we did 2x2 in Jerusalem in a festival which was outdoors in the public space, and the background was this building. And it was evening, and families were sitting down for dinner, and there is like life going on behind the piece. And something about the work, which I'm excited about, is that it kind of also allows for other things to happen around. So it becomes this ritual that's happening between, let's say, 4 people, or sometimes we do it in, you know, replicas of 4 duets with another 4 couples. But at the same time, there's kind of, it's open enough to allow for whatever is happening around us to also enter. And so the people who are sitting and watching this as witnesses are, in a way, like kind of through the work itself are I don't want to say allowed, but have the sensation that they can take in other things that are happening around. So the practice itself is also kind of shiftable and interchangeable and stuff like that. And maybe there was a question about empathy and compassion, and for me, it's very 2 different things. You know, throughout my research with empathy, one thing that really sustains itself or carries me through is this question, is the notion of curiosity, of something about the idea that empathy is about staying curious in that porousness, and compassion is connected to me to other things, which actually I think it's the danger often of how empathy is perceived. So yeah, that's maybe the answer to that.
Thank you. Anybody wants to add something to this? Rebecca, with more questions?
Yeah, so in addition to that question about the difference between empathy and compassion, the question also asks about sort of empathy versus looking at antagonism. So whether there were sort of other sort of tensions and antagonisms in addition to looking at sort of the encounters through empathy. So that's also asked. And there's another question that was also asked about whether sort of beyond the here and now, there were other kinds of larger intentions behind these performances, sort of other goals and intentions beyond the moment of the encounter.
Do you want to relate to that, maybe, Sharon?
Yeah, I think that one of the most interesting opportunities I found was to invite the audience to look at things we not used to observe. Maybe as a code that we invented, the society, to give freedom to the different, to be, and not to press him with our look. So here we really would like to invite you to look at us in our difference. So maybe you could collaborate or dialogue with it in some way, or imagining, or just opening. I have difficulty to speak about in general about empathy because empathy. What is empathy? Like is down. I don't know if I'm clear, but is downer than me. It's something that I have to like. Oh, this is the way we use it in our daily life. Maybe we feel more open when we accept. But actually, I think it's one of our biggest limitations, no? Because actually, this rich universe have a lot to I don't know who are we to look at things and to speak about accepting empathy, or even like it is. I have a strong critic about ourselves. We are very limited. We are designed in this way, and so I don't accept this word. This is my point of view on that. Yeah.
Nativ, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I will jump in because yeah. I like it the way that also Yasmeen is talking about practicing empathy, because empathy is not self-granted, right? I used to work with the dramaturg of Yasmeen, Monica Gillette, who is a great collaborator, I guess, of both of us. And also in the work of Monica, that she worked together with Yasmeen on the project Choreographer for people with Parkinson, dancers, and neuroscientists. So we had a workshop about also the process of embodying empathy. And part of the thing about empathy, coming from Husserl and Edith Stein, it's a process of Mitgefühl. It's a process of feeling with. It's not being in the shoes of the other, but understanding that the other has another shoes, that the other has other kind of intentionality, that the other has another kind of storytelling. There's also a strong debate nowadays about empathy and the mirror neurons, and what is a kinesthetic empathy as something that we just see. So jumping into this debate, for example, the philosopher Sean Gallier says, yeah, of course, there's mirror neuron and so on, but there's also a process of storytelling, because empathy needs to be a process when you understand that the intentionality of another person is different from your intentionality, that he has different intentionality. And when it comes to the body, it's very much problematic, because what we empathize with something that we can understand the intentionality, that we can understand the physical expression. So what happens when we see people from different cultural backgrounds? What happens when we see people with different physicalities? So we feel first and foremost rejection, because we don't understand this physical expression. For Husserl, this intersubjective understanding starts from having a body, from recognizing the physicality of another person. But what if the other person is different than us? So here the question of empathy starts to be way more complex. It's a process of negotiation. And I think that that's why the process of imagining, of practicing, and bringing another ways of storytelling through the arts is a very important cultural aspect of practicing empathy.
Thank you for that, Nativ. We can only take one more question, I think, Rebecca. We are really at the end, kind of wow, extending the time. Thank you for staying with us.
So as we wrap up, perhaps all of our speakers could say a word about their other work that they're working on, because we've been asked also sort of, is this the entirety of your projects? And I'm sure it's not. So perhaps that might be one way to close, just sort of giving us a sense of your other projects that this is a piece of.
Mm.
Well, I can jump in because it's actually related to the questioning that Sharon raised and then that Einav went ahead and elaborated upon, and that is that I'm interested in the politics of refusal. And this is coming from the book I wrote that was about collaboration and empathy. The other side to that is how can we respectfully refuse to be understood? How can we say no to the presumption that someone might make to try to empathize or imagine that they can inhabit our experiences? So I'm interested in that in particular with with Asian American identity and the ways in which Asian American, the sort of stereotype of the Asian American is that she is passive. And I want to talk about the ways in which passivity can be a form of refusal.
Okay, you guys, we have to close. Absolutely. Thank you so much, all of you, Einav and Sansan, Sharon and Yasmeen, Rebecca, and all the people who were with us and sent us some good questions. Hope to see you soon. I see some really people I miss in Israel and not in Israel. Yes, hope to see you soon all. It's very soon. Good night in Israel.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye. Bye, Ali. Thank you.
Bye-bye.